From early on, I realized there were two types of people in the world: those who chased money all the time, and those who seemed to walk calmly while money chased them. And for a long time, this left me confused because everyone worked hard, but the result was never the same for everyone. It was only when I heard Kiyosaki explain that the rich follow different rules that everything started to make sense. And he didn't say this as criticism, but rather as someone revealing something nobody told us when we were younger. Because while most of us learn to work to earn a salary, the rich learn to make money work for them. And the difference starts there, because they see money in a way nobody teaches us. They treat it as a tool, not as a problem. And when you understand these rules, you realize that what brought worry your whole life didn't need to be that way. That money only becomes a burden when you play the wrong game, without knowing there's another one, much smarter, much lighter, much more strategic. When you learn this different way of dealing with money, your mind opens like a door that was always there, but you had never noticed. And from that moment, money stops being an enemy and becomes an ally that just needed to be understood. And when you start observing more closely, you notice this difference in rules appears in the small daily choices, because while most people only think about what they need to pay tomorrow, those who understand the rich's game think about what that decision can build a few years from now. And this changes everything, because you leave survival mode and enter strategy mode. And in this mode, every step becomes an opportunity to grow, even if it seems small. At first, Kiyosaki always says, it's not about having a lot of money to start, but rather about starting with what you have, but with a new way of looking at it. And when you finally understand this logic, you realize the problem was never money, but rather the way we were taught to deal with it, because deep down, nobody trained us to think like investors, entrepreneurs, or asset owners. They trained us to work, obey schedules, get paid at the end of the month, and repeat this for our whole life without questioning. It's as if you had spent years playing a game without knowing the true rules. And when you discover these rules, everything fits, because you see that money is not an enemy. It's just energy that goes where it's called by those who know how to guide it. And when you learn to speak this language, money stops running away and starts obeying your direction. And this is the turnaround Kiyosaki wants people to have, because when you understand the rich's game, it doesn't matter where you came from, how much you earn, or what you've been through. Because from then on, you learn that wealth is more about mindset than about wallet. And when this mindset activates, money stops being a problem and becomes a path. When Kiyosaki talks about earning more money, he's not telling you to get 2 jobs or work until you can't take it anymore. He's talking about something much smarter. He explains that most people spend their whole life seeking security, while those who truly grow seek skills, because that's what opens doors to new opportunities. And that's where the first pillar begins, because learning to earn more money is not about chasing a higher salary. It's about chasing yourself. It's about discovering what you don't know yet, but need to learn. And when you understand this, everything changes, because you stop working just to complete tasks and start working, thinking about how each task can leave you more prepared for the next level. Kiyosaki always repeats that one of the most valuable skills is selling. Not just selling products, but selling ideas, projects, solutions. Because when you learn to communicate well, to negotiate, and to deal with people, you never again get stuck in the same place. And this is the type of skill that doesn't depend on age, on diploma, or where you came from. It only depends on your willingness to learn. And in this first pillar, there's a simple truth. The more skills you develop, the more doors open, and the more doors open, the more money finds paths to reach you, because it always reaches those who are prepared to solve problems and deliver value. That's why Kiyosaki says, choose jobs that make you grow, accept challenges that scare you a little, because it's in these challenges that you discover strength, creativity, and courage. And these are exactly the three things that build the foundation of those who learn to earn more money consistently and intelligently. If up to here, some part of this video spoke to you, if some phrase gave you that spark inside or reminded you there's still time to change, then go ahead and leave your like. Because this shows YouTube this content is truly helping someone, and if you really believe you can change your life starting today, write in the comments, "I will change my life," because this simple phrase is the first step to creating a commitment with yourself and starting the transformation you deserve. Kiyosaki explains there's a simple and powerful way to become more financially intelligent, and this way doesn't depend on money. It depends on looking at other people's problems with attention. Because when you hear someone talk about debts, difficulties, bad decisions, or even lost opportunities, you learn without needing to go through the pain that person went through. And this accelerates your evolution. It's as if each conversation were a lesson, because when you help someone organize bills, understand interest, negotiate payments, or think about how to earn more, you activate a part of your mind you might never have used before. And this part is exactly the financial intelligence so many people look for, but few truly develop. And the most interesting thing is that by helping you learn to see patterns, because you notice many situations repeat themselves, that mistakes are similar, and that almost always the problem starts with lack of knowledge. So each time you analyze another person's financial life, it's as if you were training not to repeat the same paths. And then comes a moment when you realize you became wiser, more prepared, and more strategic, and that all this happened simply because you were willing to listen, understand, and guide someone. Because those who solve other people's financial problems learn 10 times faster than those who try to figure everything out alone. And when you keep helping, you notice each story brings a piece of knowledge you might never find in a book, because one person tells how they lost money trusting the wrong person. Another reveals they worked for years without saving anything and didn't know where to start. Another admits they spent impulsively without realizing how much this sabotaged their plans. And you keep accumulating all this inside you, like someone who collects valuable lessons. Gradually, something natural starts happening. You begin identifying solutions faster. You understand where the problem is before the person even finishes their sentence. And you see paths that before seemed invisible, because your mind starts functioning like someone who's seen that many times. And that's exactly how financial intelligence is born. It's not memorizing difficult terms. It's living real learnings, even if through other people's lives. And the more you participate in these dialogues, the more you realize helping is not just a generous gesture. It's powerful training, because by teaching you, organize your own thinking, by explaining you retain, by guiding you grow, and without realizing what seemed complicated starts making sense, and you discover you became more prepared to deal with your own financial life. That's why Kiyosaki repeats so many times that solving other people's financial problems is one of the fastest paths to develop your mind, because when you learn from others' stories, you gain years of experience in a few minutes, and that's worth gold. The moment you start earning a bit more, the first thing you need to learn is to protect what you've conquered, because there are many paths that seem safe, but actually only serve to take away what took you so long to gather. And Kiyosaki calls these financial predators because they're everywhere, and if you don't know how to recognize them, you end up falling without realizing. It's that bank offering a product that seems perfect but hides fees. Nobody explains to you. It's that broker who talks nicely but has no experience and just wants to push what gives commission. It's that consultant who says they'll take care of your money but doesn't even take care of their own. And when you realize you've already lost time, money, and trust. That's why Kiyosaki insists so much that the best way to protect yourself is to learn the basics on your own. Not to become a specialist, but not to be deceived, because when you understand the minimum, you already know how to ask the right questions. You already notice when something doesn't make sense. And you can already identify who really knows what they're talking about. And when you finally find an experienced professional, someone who shows numbers, explains risks, tells the truth, even when it's not exciting, you recognize right away, because someone who's good doesn't promise miracles. They show paths and make clear you remain responsible for your choices. And that's the greatest protection that exists. The protection of knowledge, of attention, and of critical sense. Because when you develop this, nobody can manipulate your money anymore. And when you understand this need to protect your money, you start noticing how many people lose, not because they earn little, but because they let anyone mess with what they took years to gather. And that's where the danger lies, because poorly protected money escapes through your fingers like water, while well-cared-for money grows calmly, safely, and with direction. Over time, you realize protecting your money is not about distrusting everything. It's about knowing where to step. It's about understanding that proposals that are too beautiful usually hide traps. It's about noticing that those who promise easy profit are offering high risk, and that those who promise guaranteed return are hiding something you don't know yet. And when you learn to see this clearly, your mind creates a kind of filter that saves you from a lot of headache. And this filter only appears when you decide to learn a bit more about finances, even if gradually reading an article, watching a video, asking someone who really understands, because each small piece of knowledge works as a wall that protects what's yours, and each new piece of information becomes a way to avoid mistakes that would cost months or even years of your effort. And as you become more secure, you realize protecting money is not an act of fear. It's an act of intelligence, because money doesn't go with carelessness. Money goes with attention, with strategy, and with conscious decision. And when you develop this ability, everything you build becomes firmer, more stable, and more prepared to grow. When Kiyosaki reaches the third pillar, he talks about something almost nobody truly does: managing your own money, because most people only receive spend, pay bills, and try to have something left at the end of the month, but almost never have anything left. And this happens because the process is backwards. Everyone pays the world first, and only then tries to pay themselves. And when you do this, you put yourself last, all the time. That's why Kiyosaki teaches a simple but powerful change. Pay yourself first. And when you do this, you create a surplus, not because you earn a lot, but because you decide a part of what you receive goes directly to building your future before any bill appears. And when this decision becomes habit, something inside you starts changing, because you start seeing yourself as someone who deserves to grow, not as someone who lives putting out fires. And it's at this moment assets come into play, because managing money well is not just saving, it's knowing where to put this money so it works for you even while you sleep. And assets are exactly that. Things that put money in your pocket month after month without requiring your direct effort. They can be investments, real estate, businesses, extra income, everything that generates return instead of consuming your energy. And when you start prioritizing assets, your financial life gains a completely new direction, because from that moment on, it's no longer you paying the bills, it's your assets paying for you, and this brings a freedom few people experience, because each asset you build takes a weight off your shoulders and puts more strength in your journey. That's why Kiyosaki says, even your luxuries should come from assets, because when a luxury comes from your pocket, it becomes a problem. But when it comes from what your assets produce, it becomes an achievement that doesn't hurt you. And this is the key to living with balance, security, and constant growth, because managing money is not knowing how to cut, it's knowing how to direct. When those complicated moments arrive, when money tightens, and the first reaction of almost everyone is to cut everything, start removing what works and what doesn't, Kiyosaki teaches something that seems opposite to what we were educated to do. He says in difficult moments, it's exactly when you most need to keep investing in assets, because if you cut everything, you stop feeding precisely what could get you out of difficulty. And it's at this time you realize those who grow financially think differently, while most enter survival mode. Those who understand the game enter construction mode because they know assets will create the exit, not fear. So instead of reducing to zero, you direct the little you have to something that can bring return tomorrow, even if small, because that's what keeps the cycle alive. And there's also a concept that scares many people, but that Kiyosaki explains clearly: good debts, which are those that don't take money from your pocket but put money in, because they're used to buy assets that generate income, not to buy things that disappear over time. And when you learn this difference, you realize there are debts that sink you and debts that lift you. And knowing how to identify this changes your relationship with money in any phase of life. This is the thinking that protects and strengthens, because even when the moment seems bad, you keep building your future without stopping. When Kiyosaki talks about the fourth pillar, he explains, investing is not a luxury reserved for few people. Investing is a necessity, because those who don't invest stay stuck in the same place, counting only on their own effort. And this creates a limit that one day arrives. So he shows the path to financial freedom begins when you put your money to work in several places at the same time. He always remembers investing is not putting everything in one place, nor depending on that traditional savings account that barely keeps up with inflation. Investing is spreading your seeds in different lands, because each land grows differently, some fast, others slow, some with higher risk, others more stable. And it's precisely this mix that protects you. That's why he talks about real estate, stocks, businesses, opportunities that put money in your pocket while you live your life. Because when you diversify, you create several engines running at the same time. And even if one slows down, the others keep pushing you forward. And that's how you stop depending on luck and start depending on strategy. Because investing is not predicting the future, it's preparing the ground. So your future has options you wouldn't have if you only depended on daily work. Kiyosaki explains today, the biggest challenge is not lack of information, it's excess. Because every minute someone appears giving different advice, saying what you should do to get rich, promising easy paths, or creating stories that seem true but aren't. And if you don't learn to filter all this, you end up making decisions based on noise instead of making decisions based on reality. That's why the fifth pillar is managing information, because when your mind is full of loose data, you get confused, hesitate, and lose opportunities. But when you learn to separate what's fact from what's just opinion, your vision becomes clear and you start seeing what really makes sense for your financial life. And this ability doesn't come from studying hours and hours. It comes from asking yourself some simple things. Does this make sense? Is this proven? Does this person live what they're teaching? Does this information bring hidden risk or just look pretty? And when you do this filtering, you realize many things that seemed urgent weren't, and many things that seemed small were exactly what would make a difference. Kiyosaki always says, the right information is like a compass. It doesn't give you speed, but gives you direction. And when you have direction, you go further with much less effort, because each step is taken with awareness, not with impulsiveness. And in this accelerated world, knowing how to filter is almost a superpower, because it protects you from mistakes, guides you to better decisions, and keeps you on the growth path, even when everyone around is lost. Kiyosaki makes clear these 5 pillars don't work separately, because each one sustains the other, like the legs of a table. If one fails, everything becomes unstable. When you learn to earn more but don't protect your money, you grow and lose. When you protect but don't manage, you save and don't multiply. When you manage but don't invest, you organize and don't advance. When you invest, but don't filter information. You put your future in the hands of any opinion. That's why he insists so much on building everything at the same time, even if slowly, because when you strengthen these pillars together, your financial life becomes firm, secure, and prepared for any phase that comes ahead. And that's when you start noticing real and lasting results. At the end of everything, Kiyosaki explains, there's an element. No spreadsheet, no book, no course can replace courage, because it's what puts into practice everything you learned, and without it, all knowledge stays stuck inside your head without generating any change. And courage is not something enormous. It's that small step you take, even with doubt, even with fear, even without having all the answers. It's the courage to ask for help when you don't understand something. It's the courage to hear feedback you might not want, but need. It's the courage to continue when it seems nothing is changing, and it's the courage to maintain focus even when the path gets slower, because wealth is not born from haste, it's born from consistency, and courage is precisely what allows you to remain consistent. And when you join courage with the 5 pillars, everything starts flowing because your mind becomes prepared, your decisions become stronger, and your future starts taking shape the way you always wanted to build, because in the end, the difference between those who change their life and those who stay in the same place is not luck, it's courage. And if this video is reaching you now, it's not by chance, because life always finds a way to speak to those who are ready to listen, even if the person doesn't yet realize they're ready. And maybe while you were listening to each part of this story, something moved inside, a thought, a memory, a feeling that there's still a chance, and that you don't need to accept the financial life you have today as final destiny, because the truth is, nobody is born knowing how to deal with money. Nobody starts life mastering pillars, strategies, or right decisions. Everyone learns by walking, making mistakes, stumbling, getting up and continuing again. But there's a huge difference between those who keep evolving and those who stay stuck in the same cycles. The difference is in allowing knowledge to become attitude. And when you put attitude in your financial life, small things start changing. You notice you can save a bit more. You notice you can cut a habit that takes you nowhere. You notice a fear that seemed giant wasn't that big. You notice an investment that seemed impossible was just unknown. And you notice what seemed complicated starts becoming simple when explained the right way. And from that moment, your mind starts working in your favor, because it starts seeing opportunities where before it only saw difficulties. It starts finding solutions where before it only saw blockages. It starts noticing paths where before it saw walls. And this change doesn't happen because the world became easier, but because you became more prepared. And when you become prepared, life changes the way it moves around you. It shows you new people, new ideas, new chances that maybe were always there, but you didn't yet have the clarity to see. And that's exactly what these pillars do. They adjust your vision, not just of money, but of yourself. Because when you understand the game, you stop being a piece and become a player. And maybe someone already told you you wouldn't make it. Maybe you yourself already believed it wasn't your time, or it was too late. But listen carefully. Everything you lived until today only brought you here, so now you could act with more awareness and more strength, because every change starts with a simple thought. I can change my life, and it's this thought that transforms the future. And if this video is speaking to you, if you felt some part hit deep, if you realized you let too much time pass, waiting for the perfect moment, then let this video be the beginning of your turnaround, because nothing changes until you decide it will change. And when you decide, the world opens space.